Welcome to the Waiting List podcast. Tell us a story.
It's like many things you start building from scratch.
And then I'm like, wait, I really do like watches because
You've seen so many watches that makes you excited.
I think I really do like watches.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to see if you are a watch enthusiast. Welcome to the Waiting List podcast, and today we're happy to welcome back James Jen, who is part of the Beyond the Dial team. As usual, I'm joined by my co-hosts Jacqueline and Long Long.
Hi.
Right. So now I know you're a proper watch nerd, but I was really shocked to hear that you only recently got into watches. And you know what? Like this year, you can't believe how many times I've heard that. I'm like, what? Like Jacqueline is a total example of that. Like what? And then I think I must be the slowest learner of all time. Because it seems everyone on this podcast that joins started a few years ago, but the knowledge is insane. Like, what was I doing? But I think the obvious question. That's not very nice. That's not very nice at all. All right. Do you want to elaborate? Elaborate, please.
Continue.
Elaborate so I can shoot you down.
Continue.
Okay, right. I think the obvious question is to ask, how did you get into watches?
Yeah, so I think some of it had to do, well, there's two things. I think one was that after Trump was elected, he was so pervasive and you couldn't get away from him. So I needed to have a hobby where I wasn't looking at the newspaper anymore. I usually used to read the newspaper, but it was like appalling every time you open the newspaper. I think that's also responsible for a lot of people getting into watches. So that might be part of it.
So Trump basically single-handedly made the watch industry. Yeah, saved the watch industry.
It's possible. The other thing was, I was like, I used to wear a watch when I was a kid, right? It was like a practical thing, through high school, before I carried a mobile phone around, I always had a watch, through college. And then, I started carrying a cell phone all the time, and then I just kind of stopped wearing a watch. So then I think that's also true of a lot of people. But I felt like, so in my medical practice, I was becoming basically becoming like a partner in it. And so, I had a little bit more disposable income, and there was going to be a meeting where they voted me in. And it's a large group. It's like, 300 or 400 doctors. So I felt like, okay, well, this is a big milestone in my life. So I should get like a nice watch, right? I'm an adult now, this is like becoming a man or something. I don't know. So then I don't know if I should go into the whole story, but
please do.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a good story.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
I wrote about it for Beyond the Dial, actually, but yeah. So basically, what happened was, I started checking out watch blogs. I found somewhere online there was like a guide. It said, well, if you want to know about watches, you got to read these 4 blogs. It was like Hodinkee, a blog to watch, and Worn and Wound, or something like that.
Yeah.
Started reading like Hodinkee. Started trying to learn about watches a little bit. I went to a few watch stores, tried on some different watches. One of the first times I went was I went to this event in New York City. It was like I think a doctor thing. It was at a kind of a fancy club in the city. It was like an educational thing, lectures. And so, I was wearing like a suit. It was like a nice venue. So there was a lunch break. So I went outside. I walked around Fifth Avenue in New York, and I saw a store called Vempy. It's like a pretty fancy watch store. So I was like looking in the windows, like, oh, this is great. Let me check it out. I'm like well dressed. Let me go in here. So I went inside. The lady says to me, she starts speaking to me in Mandarin, which was at first, okay, that was very surprising. But the thing that was even more surprising is that this is like a white girl, like a young white woman speaking to me in perfect, unaccented Mandarin, perfect Mandarin. And I'm just looking at her like, oh man, what's going on? Who are you? Why are you speaking Mandarin? Why are you white? What's going on?
Why are you white?
And then I tried to respond in Mandarin, my poor Mandarin, a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I was like, and then she's like, oh wait, yeah, exactly. And she's like, oh wait, no, you speak English. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm like,
yeah.
Yeah.
You speak really good Mandarin. Where'd you learn how to speak Mandarin? And so, yeah, I didn't realize at that time there's so many Chinese tourists. They come and they buy like lots of luxury items, but like it like surprised me a lot. But it was funny because when I was in the store, I saw Chinese people in the store like talking, and you know how Chinese people like to get together and they speak Mandarin. They're like, these white people aren't going to understand what we're saying,
Yeah.
They're, like speaking Mandarin, like this is too expensive. What about this one? This one's ugly. And I look at this girl, I'm like, you understand everything. So you're like a spy in here, You're like the white spy in the store.
Yeah.
So I like looked around the store, trying out some different watches. I had read a lot about Nomos, and I'm like, oh, I guess I should buy Nomos, right? It's like German. It's not that expensive. It's like really good quality or whatever. I tried it on. I was like, wasn't that into it. Kind of not that exciting, I guess. So then I saw one watch, and I'm like, oh, that's a cool watch. Let me try that one on. And then the guy pulls it out. He shows it to me. I'm like, actually, I saw it in the window. I'm like, can you get that one from the window? He's like, yeah. He pulls it out and he's like, he puts on like, gloves, like white gloves.
Yeah.
He puts that pillow and he like shows it to me. And I'm like, oh, this is a cool watch. I try it on. How much is this watch? And the guy's like, he's like, oh, it's 50. I'm like, 5,000? He's like, 50,000. And I was like, what? I thought you said this watch is German. And he's like, it's a Longue. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, oh, it's a perpetual calendar chronograph.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's a what kind of calendar? I had no idea a watch could cost that much. I was like shocked. I was like, whoa. I was like scared. I was like, get away from me. I'm like,
that would have been the datograph, perpetual datograph then. Chronograph, perpetual calendar. It would have been one of those ones.
I think so. It had a big date, I think.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. Okay. I was like, can I take a picture of it? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And then my Instagram career got started. And then,
can I interrupt you here?
Yeah, sure.
Can we what year was this? So it kind of puts into perspective how easy it was to get watches back then and now. And so what year was this?
Like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And so then I, looked at different watches. I saw Longines, and it was also a chronograph. And then I found out the price was much less. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll get this. I was thinking about it. But, I went to a local watch store when I got home, and was kind of like, mulling it over. But then the meeting was getting close. So I felt like, okay, I got to go buy a watch. Like the whole point is to wear the watch to the meeting. I better go buy it soon, right? And then I'm like, all right. Well, then I Googled Longines. I'm like, oh, there's a boutique.
Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, the boutique. It must be better, right? So but the boutique was in like the World Trade Center, which if you know Manhattan, it's like all the way on the southern tip of Manhattan. I live in Westchester, which is like north of the city. So the drive to the southern tip of Manhattan is like a really long drive, especially with traffic. And so, and also when you get there, parking is like really difficult. And so I had to park in a parking garage. The parking garage is like $50. And I'm like, all right, I'm here. Friday, I got to work slightly early. But like, I'm like, if I get caught in the rush hour traffic going back home, my wife's going to kill me because I won't get home till like 7, 8 o'clock. So I better go buy this watch quick, right? It's like a Longines boutique. And I'm like, all right, well, yeah, that one. Like, I like that one. And the guy's like, okay. So he brings it out. I look at it. I'm like, all right, cool. So they put on my credit card. I give them the credit card. They ring it up, and then I get a security alert, like someone's trying to use your credit card to buy a watch in Manhattan. Like someone must have stolen your credit card number. I'm like, I had to call them, and be like, no, this is me. Don't worry about it, or whatever. And so I buy the watch, and then as I'm about to leave, the guy's like, oh, what's your occupation, sir? And I'm like, I'm a doctor. I told him that it was for a medical thing. The guy's like, oh, well, we have actually a chronograph for doctors. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, would you like to? Well, I can't sell it to you now because it's a very limited model, but I can show it to you when it's already been reserved. I'm like, okay, show it to me. I'm like, I gotta go, right? Like, I'm gonna get charged another $50 for parking, and I gotta get home. My wife's gonna kill me. So the guy brings out the watch, and it's actually a cool watch. It's like a pulsometer. Yeah. It's got a mono pusher. It's modified movement. And it's a white dial. I'm like, oh, it's a cool watch. I'm like, can I get this one instead? He's like, oh no, it's reserved. It's reserved. But I'm sure we'll have another one in the future. So if you want to come back, we might be able to sell it to you then. Maybe we'll have another one come in from Switzerland or whatever. I'm like, then I'm like, why didn't you just sell me that watch? Like, you sold me this watch. And so then I went home. I got caught in rush hour traffic. My wife was not happy. And so then, I was wearing the watch and I wore it to the meeting or whatever. But, the chronograph, it's like, I guess I like the look of it, but a chronograph, especially like a 40 millimeter chronograph, it's like pretty big. It's like bulky. And it was like not that comfortable on my wrist. My wrist is kind of skinny, So then I try to wear it every day because I'm like, okay, I bought this watch. I have to wear it every day, right? This is my watch for the rest of my life. And then I was wearing it. It was something comfortable. I didn't really like it. And then I started Googling it because, I was kind of in a rush to get it because I had this meeting coming up. And then I was like, what watch should I buy anyway? I guess I should learn something about it from Hodinkee or whatever, right? So I looked up the number, the model number. And then I saw it was on the gray market. It was selling for like 40% off or 30% off or something. I'm like, why did I pay so much money? And then they didn't give me the one that I wanted. And then I could have bought it for so much cheaper. And then I started getting annoyed at the watch. Like it was the watch's fault. Like, you're uncomfortable. You're hurting me every day. I don't like you. I should have gotten the other watch. And then and I could have gotten you for much cheaper. You ripped me off. I was kind of like angry at my watch. So then I ended up eventually selling the watch. And I started collecting vintage watches after that. Like I went on a little exploration trip, adventure. Like I was looking for watch stores, and I saw on a blog to watch or one of those watch blogs and reviewed a store in New Jersey, and it's not that far from where I live. So I crossed the George Washington Bridge. I went to New Jersey. I went to the store, and it was just like a regular watch store. I was like, all right, whatever. And then I was driving past another store, and it was like a jewelry and watch store. I'm like, okay, well, let me check this place out. But then this guy only sells vintage watches and like pre-owned watches, but like a lot of vintage, mostly vintage, not that much jewelry actually. So the guy was nice. He let me look around. There was no pressure. It wasn't bugging me. I wasn't paying $50 for parking. It was like a 25-cent parking meter, for half an hour. It was great. So I looked at some different watches. I saw a vintage Breitling. I took pictures of it. I was like really annoyed from last time. I was like, I'm really doing my research. I went on the forums and I posted it. And like Watch Fred said it was okay. That guy, Fred Mendelbaum. And then he was kind enough to say that. And so then I bought the watch, and then I've been into vintage watches ever since then.
Right, Longling, you have a question, I think.
Yeah, I'm really curious what you felt when you wore the long jeans to the meeting. Like, did you feel like the shit? Like, were you like, yeah, look at me? Or were you just like, this is a tool. I just need to look put together. Like, I know, like, I have my shit together. Kind of thing.
Yeah, did you do this, James? Did you do the whole wrist at the cuff? Wrist at the cuff before you went into the meeting? Yeah, there's my watch.
Wear it on the outside of the cuff.
You know how you pull your hand out the cuff, like, there's my watch. There's my watch.
What time is it?
And I've laid it on the table in a very unnatural position just so that you can see the watch.
I don't think I was really trying to impress anybody. I mean, I bought a Longines after all. It wasn't like I bought the biggest watch out there. Actually, initially I felt like I should get a Rolex, but because Rolex is the watch, right? But then I was like, I want to be different or something. So, but I don't know. I'm not like a flashy person. I guess I wanted, it was more for my own sense of satisfaction. Like, I achieved the milestone, so I have this watch now. But then
you got rid of it. Right? You got
rid
of it within
eBay,
3 months. 3 months that watch lasted, which is
I had like 10 other
nothing.
watches by then.
So. Yeah. Oh, really? Right. But actually, so you told me about that watch, but actually after our first call, you didn't tell me which watch it was, but I realized it's the Longines Chronograph on the Master Collection, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's actually relatively, I mean, you're poo-pooing it, but a lot of people will like that watch because it has
a nice watch.
Yeah, it has very classic tones. It's part of perhaps their kind of premium line. That's also... Yeah, it's slightly different from your standard Longines. But what was it about Longines that captivated you to buy one? What is it? Something about the brand, or was it? And if you talk about the price bracket, why did you not? There's lots of other watches that you can consider at that price. Was it because it's quintessentially like almost to an entry-level watch lover, a dress watch?
I think I like the look of it. Like, I like the chronograph look with the subdials and the pushers sticking out. and it kind of had like the vintage ones look kind of like, or the vintage styling was kind of like looked more classic to me. But also, actually my grandmother had a Longines in Taiwan back then. My mother kept it, and actually she gave it to me after she found I was interested in watches. But it's like a small women's watch. It's quartz, but I guess it kind of was like that connection to like something in my family, I would say.
I actually looked at the same watch, James.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I actually looked at buying the same watch. It's just I didn't make the mistake that you did.
Is it the white dial one with the black brigade numerals?
It's white dial should be, right?
It's a white dial. It's kind of got a barleycorn pattern.
Yeah. That's the one. Yeah.
It's not a bad watch. It's too bulky for me. It was part of the problem.
I was looking at that whole collection and also the Lindbergh watch. So that has like historical value within the Longines brand. So I looked at that, but I never, sounds really bad, but I could never go back to like a brand like Longines anymore unless it was like the 13ZN vintage Longines. And what that brand is now is basically, as we all know, a shadow of its former self, because it was winning chronometer trials all the like there's a period of golden era for Longines, and it's not now. That's I could tell you that.
The chronographs were, I think, the best. Like, I think they're time only watches, or I would say put a little bit below Omega of that era, but their chronographs, I think, were like the best with those movements. Also the 30CH, the successor to 30ZN. Those are really amazing movements.
What's really interesting,
I handled one recently, and it's very crisp, the flyback.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, was it the fact that you were in a rush to buy the watch that made you do the research backwards? Because,
I think so.
Or was it the $50 that you paid in the thing that was like the pushing factor for you to buy a watch? Because that's unbelievable. Because you checked the price of the watch on the grey market after you bought it. Like, what logic is that?
Well, first of all, I didn't know that the gray market existed. So that's one thing in my defense. I would say another thing was that, like, I'm a busy guy, right? Like, I'm a doctor. I have a busy practice. I have 2 young kids. I have a lot of obligations, and, my career is getting busier. So it's not like I had a lot of free time to go watch hunting. Like, it's like time away would be, it's not like really time away from work, but it's be like time away from my kids. So I felt like I had to kind of bang this thing out, quickly.
It's funny how you found time now to do it.
Well, we're in a pandemic now.
As you've fallen down the rabbit hole.
But suddenly, I don't have to go anywhere.
That's true.
I can do this at home. My kids are asleep upstairs.
Oh, okay. Right. So are you, actually, just touching on it, how's work now? Are you going in, or what's the situation over there?
Yeah, I've been going in the whole time. Here in New York, it's getting better. We were really afraid that we'd have like a big winter holiday surge, that it was going to be as bad as, last April or worse. But actually, it wasn't nearly as bad. Like in March and April, the hospital was, okay, first of all, every bed in the hospital was a COVID bed. And then there wasn't enough COVID beds, and the hospital expanded, added more beds because there wasn't enough space for all the patients. And the ER was full to bursting, people going out the door, nowhere to put all the patients, like tripled up in one spot, quadrupled up in one spot in the hallway and everything. This surge has been like manageable in that it's, about half of the beds filled up. I think we kind of hit the peak like last week, essentially. And then the numbers have been coming down. And it's really half the hospital is full of has COVID patients. So basically what we do is like we have certain floors for COVID. So like half of the floors are COVID, half are not COVID. And I would say for me as a surgeon, the biggest operating difference is that during that emergency time, there was no surgery, no elective surgery. And the reason for that is that if someone's having elective surgery, they need a bed in the hospital, and also they need, a ventilator for short term, right? They need a nurse in the operating room who could be elsewhere, possibly a critical care nurse. You need an anesthesiologist to put them to sleep and wake them up. So they demand a lot of resources, and especially the beds. You keep doing surgery, they stay in the hospital for a few days, those beds are full. I think it's normally like almost half of the hospital or a third of the hospital beds are occupied by surgery patients. So surgery was closed, so we couldn't operate except for emergencies. But this time we've been continuing to operate, continuing to do surgery. At that time, things were put off that later on led to problems. So it's much better, and things are
that's good.
starting to get better. Our positivity rate is going down. Yeah. Overall, it wasn't as bad as the first wave. Not at all. Not in New York. Elsewhere in the country was worse, maybe, or just as bad. But here, it wasn't as bad.
That's good to hear. Going back to watches, you pretty much, as you mentioned, got your next watch very quickly. Now, you're already satisfied your meeting with buying a watch, so you don't need that anymore. You've done it. What made you want to get the second watch, a third watch, fourth watch?
Because they're beautiful, they're shiny, they're I don't know. Why does anybody collect anything? I guess they're interesting. I started getting more into it, started reading about it, appreciating it, appreciating the history. Vintage. I think there's a lot more to get into also because there's history involved. This watch was made in the 60s or made in the 50s. I think about what my family was doing at that time period of time, or a watch from the 40s, World War II era. It's kind of like a connection to the past. It gives us some interest. And then
is there a particular niche in the vintage watch you go into?
I wouldn't say that there's a niche exactly, but I would say I have areas. So I think there's two things. One, there's inclusion criteria, and then there's exclusion. So I have areas of interest like alarm watches, chronographs, certain time only pieces. And then I have exclusion criteria, which in order to not spend too much money on watches, I have a lot of exclusion criteria. And it's become more stringent over time, especially as I have examples of certain things that I like. So then I have to find something that's better in a way. So the exclusion criteria, the biggest one at this point is probably condition, because it's very hard to find a vintage watch if basically the more strict you are about condition, the harder it is to find the watch. It may be impossible. So then you don't spend the money to save a few bucks. And then other things are for exclusion. I decided that I'm not going to buy radium. Not because I think it's so dangerous necessarily for me, but I have little kids, and so I think it's probably fine. But I don't really feel comfortable having especially when my wife was pregnant. I was thinking, okay, I can't buy a radium watch, So I had a couple. I put them in the safe deposit box at the bank. Eventually, I sold them, and then I just stopped buying radium while my kids are young. So that excludes a lot, actually. A lot of things I would like to buy, I can't buy because they're radium.
So is that your collecting philosophy then, James? Condition, alarm clock, alarm watches, and what's the other one? Chronographs. So is that what you generally stick to? And would you say that's your philosophy about how you buy, apart from condition? Are there any other factors? Or
I think value is important to me as well. So that makes it harder too, because I think the watch market is pretty transparent in terms of pricing, and then it tends to go up, and then because everybody has to make their bid, right? There's the guy who has the watch, and he sells the watch, and then the dealer has the watch, and the dealer has to sell the watch for more than he bought it from, and then another dealer gets that watch and needs to sell it for more than what he got it from. So then it keeps going up and up. So finding a watch at a good price is important to me. It's kind of a challenge. It makes it more of a treasure hunt. If I can find something, like a diamond in the rough, it's more exciting, more interesting. Yeah. It's harder. It's like a game. You have to make the game harder over time, right? Not easier.
So you actually have a few watches. I'm not going to say exactly how many you do, but you have quite a few. And is it the hunt for the watch, the ownership of the watch, or wearing the watch? Which part gives you most joy?
I think probably I think probably it's the hunt, because it's like you're constantly looking, so it gives you something to do. And then when you find it, you're like, oh my God, and then you get excited. Owning it is nice too, because you take it out and look at it. I used to wear my vintage watches more, but because of COVID, like I don't really wear them to work. Because initially I was like, I stopped wearing a watch entirely, and then I bought a modern watch, inexpensive, Hamilton watch, to wear to work, so that like I could wash in the sink when I was done with the work. So I got in the habit of just wearing a modern watch every day. I don't really wear my vintage watches anymore. So I think maybe that's taking some of the joy. But servicing the watch is very difficult. It can be expensive, but even worse than the expense is a time.
Fees.
What's that?
Parking fees. You don't want to pay the parking fees.
No. My watchmaker has to. It's not in the city. It's in Connecticut. He's in Connecticut.
Is that one of the criteria of finding a good watchmaker repairer? One that has inclusive parking fees, free parking. I feel like we're playing Monopoly or something.
The watchmaker is extremely important for vintage watches, because
yes,
you can't have it without the watchmaker. The watchmaker makes it run. And then most watchmakers don't want to deal with a vintage watch because it's a pain. Like, why would they want to do that? They could service like 20 Eddas, or they could do all these Rolexes. Like, why would they want to service some weird movement that doesn't exist anymore? The parts aren't available. You have to hunt the parts down. They spend so much time hunting down the parts. My watchmaker, I think he repairs them because he likes to. It's like fun for him, but it's not like, I don't think it's necessarily profitable or the most efficient use of his time. I think it's just kind of like a hobby for him also. But finding a watchmaker who can fix the piece is important. So actually some of my collecting is influenced by him as well. Like it's much easier to find vintage Omega parts, for example, up to, excluding certain ones, but up to a point, like for the 50s, 60s, definitely the 70s, it's like very easy to find Omega parts. But I had another watch that was a Marvin, triple calendar moon phase, and Marvin doesn't exist anymore. They had in-house movements. There's some part that he was looking for. He looked for it for almost a year to find the part. It was, and then actually he gave it to me for free, the service. He said, he kind of cursed at me a few times, over the several months that I would like occasionally bug him about it. But eventually, I think the as far as I can tell from my interaction with him, the rough rule is that if a child can be conceived and born within the time that he has the watch before he gives it back to me, then the service is on him. It's just a passion project at that point.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I think especially collecting vintage, I'd say like 95% of what I have are vintage. And I didn't buy into the belief of finding a responsible watchmaker is important until I came back home to Vancouver, and I was receiving watches in the mail, and I was like, oh, some of these need to be repaired because they're not keeping time accurately. And then I actually had to go through several watchmakers, and I eventually found one guy in downtown Vancouver. And at that time, I had already sent a couple of watches over to him to service. And then I got my Patek vintage Calatrava. And then I was changing the strap. And then Luca, my cat, knocked it off the table. And it hit the ground. It wasn't carpet. It was floor. It was marble, like concrete. And then I was like, oh. I just went like silent, and he knocked it, and then I was like, I swear if people filmed me, you can play it back in slow motion, and it probably went like that, and then my foot came up trying to like catch the watch. So the watch fell from the table, and then it actually landed on my slipper, and then so it hit the slipper first, so it got some sort of relief, and then it hit the ground, and I was just like, oh no. And I turn it over. The moment that you turn it over, you're just like, okay, what are you expecting? And you're expecting the worst. And the crystal is cracked. Thankfully, like none of the hands or the dial was fine because it was enamel. So I was really scared that the dial was gonna crack. And thankfully the dial was fine, and it wasn't running, obviously. So then I call him. I was like, okay, I need to go to you. Like, are you open? And this was during COVID, right? So he had reduced office hours, business hours. And then he was like, yeah, just bring it to me. So I go to him and he's like, okay, so the balance staff is completely wrecked. I'm like,
That's
okay,
the most
so
common problem. Yeah.
yeah. So then I was like, okay, so it could be worse, right? And he's like, yeah, it could be worse, but I don't know where you're gonna find a balance staff for a 1930s Calatrava. And I was like, okay, so am I done for? So we searched for a couple of weeks and nothing came up.
Only
And
weeks.
yeah, I was really bugging him. I was like calling him and emailing him, and he's like, you know what? Let me hit up my guy, this older gentleman who makes these parts by hand, but because he's really old, it's probably going to take a long time. And then I was like, okay, just I want to salvage this. I don't care if it's, not authentic part, as long as the watch is running. And in the weeks that the gentleman was, he was on back orders, I was able to find a part on eBay, sealed in the Patek packaging. And then I was just like, this is wild. And then he sent it to me, and from US to Canada, he didn't. I asked to ship via UPS, but he didn't. He shipped it via the eBay international shipping program, which takes like 4 weeks. So it finally reached Vancouver. I brought it to him. He opened it up. The balance staff was crushed during transit.
Oh,
And I was like,
God.
ouch.
and then I was like, okay, because please tell your friend we might actually need to make that. Because I was, waiting for this part. So I complained on eBay. I was like, dude, you didn't package it well. It's a fragile part, and you just wrapped it in like plastic, and you don't know how many, places these packages go through. And then he was like, you know what? I have another one in my stock.
What?
I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Okay, ship it to me like via FedEx. I don't care. I'll pay for the $120 shipping. And he's like, okay, I'll ship it to you. Like, this one is free, but just pay for the shipping. I was like, okay. So then he shipped it, and then it got to Vancouver the next day. And then I gave it to the watchmaker, and he's like, yeah, it's the Breguet balance staff. And it was like, the watch was fixed. It's perfectly fine now. But
Wow.
I agree. Like, that entire process took like 2 to 3 months. And when I went to pick up the watch, because then I asked him to service it, I was just like, holy, like, I'm never going through that again. So I I'm very careful when I'm wearing my vintage watches now. But going back to the point, having a good watchmaker, responsible watchmaker, is very important when it comes to vintage. Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
Daniel's
I mean,
made a
like,
few parts for me too, and
yeah.
he has to find time to do it because he makes it
Yeah.
on a lathe, and it's very time consuming. He doesn't, he could be doing something else, so you have to find time when he's free. More or less, it's like a hobby. So you just have to wait till he's ready.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
We had a person earlier on in the week, right? And he's American, and he's got probably over 300 watches, which are all vintage. And he solved that problem of finding a watchmaker, because most of his vintage watches are Chinese. They're actually, mostly Chinese vintage watches. He solved the problem of finding an affordable watchmaker. And so that's why I think he got to that 300 figure. It was like the stop gap had been taken away, and his hoarding mentality had no limit anymore, and there is no limiting factor, because he just kept on seeing them and he just kept on buying them. He couldn't control himself. So
I was
when you
thinking
said
about
that,
him just now.
yeah, right.
Because
When he
it's
said-
When he
so
said the
expensive.
radium.
Oh,
No, when he said the radium thing, and I'm like, this
Yeah.
guy has like 300 watches of radium at home, but then he
Yeah.
keeps it in Ziploc bags.
Ziploc
Yeah.
bags.
Yeah, there's a lot of radon gas in those bags. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Some radium
But,
watches have more radiation than others.
Yeah.
You can't always tell by how much is on there, but because like the radium paint sometimes has different densities of radium or concentrations of radium. But I find that military watches have like super high amounts of radium.
Yeah.
Like if you wave I have a Geiger counter, and like you wave it over it.
Yeah.
And like for a vintage Seamaster I had, it was like 2. But I'm not sure the unit exactly. But when I put it over like an old Hamilton World War II watch that somebody had at a meetup somewhere. It like went off the charts. They couldn't read it at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So, how do you see your watch collection evolving in the future, further down the line? And is there any space for modern watches in your collection?
I think at this point it's achieved. I don't know. I was going to say it's achieved stability, but it hasn't.
Never
I think
will.
mostly, I think it evolves in terms of I bring pieces in that are, I think, better or more interesting, and then I sell from the bottom and collect at the top. So that's sort of been the pattern.
So,
But
what
there's
does that
always-
mean? Like, buy at the top, sell at the bottom. What does that mean?
So, as my criteria for what I buy become more strict and I exclude more things,
Okay.
I buy things that only are like, in like better condition, for example, or for a better value or better, it's or more interesting for whatever reason. But then I sell pieces that the condition is worse, it's been more polished, or it's got some kind of defect. Or, for example, I stopped collecting like gold filled, gold capped, and gold plated pieces, and I started only collecting solid metals. So I sold almost all of the ones that I had that were those, except that the gold plated one that was at Marvin that my watchmaker spent like almost a year fixing, because he gave it to me. He's like, "You cannot sell this watch, man. I'm not going to charge you, but you can never sell this." I was like, "Okay." I agreed already. So,
And modern watches?
oh, modern watches, yeah. I think that's been influenced by the pandemic. So as I said, I got a watch that I can wash in the sink, and I do need to. And for my daily wear, I've gotten used to wearing something that is kind of like, modern, robust, a little bit more reliable. With the vintage watch, every time you like look at it, you're like slightly afraid that it's going to be off. So it's kind of nice to have a watch that actually works.
Yeah. If you ever need if I ever think like I need to know the time, a vintage watch doesn't come out. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And actually, even in this COVID period, I haven't even bothered winding a lot of the watches. I just put them on.
I think vintage for modern, it's more like practical. It's like something I'm going to wear every day. The vintage is not necessarily practical. There's some, history there. There's like art. I think the difference between vintage and modern too is that, like, modern watches when they're made, there's like today there's a lot of technology, right? There's like computer aided design. There's like machines that can do like 3-dimensional, things. At that time, they didn't have that technology. So like the watches that back then were made by the watchmaker, designed by the watchmaker, assembled by the watchmaker. But today, they can take, when they design a new watch, they're like, oh, well, if I do change this setting on the computer and make this a little less good, I can save 2 cents per piece. I change this, I can save 3 cents per piece. Change this, and they shave it down and shave it down and shave it down. And then, like, back then they couldn't. They didn't know how to do that. So there's a little bit more hand finishing involved, or a little bit more humanity to the watch, because they didn't have the ability to change it and make it so much more efficient. So being less efficient sometimes is more interesting, I think.
Do you get times when your vintage watches get magnetized?
It hasn't been as big a problem for me. I don't know why.
You've been lucky, because
I have a demagnetizer, but I never use it.
Yes, so I don't. I should really invest in one.
They're cheap.
I should do that. I should do that. But then I just end up bothering Norbert.
If you do it wrong, though, you'll magnetize the case, and you're really it'll be a problem.
Okay,
That's what I hear.
I there's 2 watches that get magnetized so easily, and they're all really old. One is 1926 and one is 1934. And I really like them, so I bring them out a lot, and I take photos and wear them out, whatever. The first time, and I didn't know that magnetization, like I knew, but I didn't know it was going to happen to me. So then until like one day I looked down at the subdial, and it's just going bananas. Like the second hand just like going like this. And then I was like, wait, that's not right. And I start counting like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. And by the time I reach 2 Mississippi, it's already at 15. So then I'm like, okay, there's something wrong. I call up
Split
Norbert.
second chrono, mate. Split second chrono.
Yeah.
Centigraph. Centigraph.
Yeah.
It's a centigraph now.
Exactly.
Upgrade and complication.
It's gonna be that new Zenith
Um,
watch.
I called
1/10 of a
Norbert.
second.
Yeah, and then I was like, Norbert, my watch is running a little fast, and he's like, oh, how fast? I'm like 15, and he's like, oh, a watch this age plus or minus 15 seconds is very normal. I'm like, oh no, 15 minutes. And then he's like, oh, it's magnetized. Bring it to me. So then I drive down all the way to downtown, and then he demagnetized it. But it happens. I'm very careful about it now, but this didn't happen.
So James, what was the modern watch you actually picked for daily wear? And why?
It's a Hamilton Pilot Pioneer Professional. I think that's what it's called. It's one that's kind of like a very similar to the military Hamilton. It's got like a black dial. It's small. I think that's the thing I like the most about it. It's small, it's thin, it's manual wind.
I know the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people like that one. A lot of people have that one.
It's like there's not that many watches that are small and thin.
Yeah.
And most watches are like pretty thick, robust, and big. But that's I like the size. I think that's the main thing that I liked about it.
Because vintage watches are smaller. So did you want to stick to that thinner, smaller profile, but just more robust? Because it has a little bit of vintagey look to it, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, actually the case, at first when I saw it, I thought it was maybe simplified because it doesn't really have a lot of case finishing. But then when I saw the vintage one, it looks almost identical except for the tritium mark because the case was made in a simple way because it was a military piece, made in large quantities. So it actually is fairly accurate. If you see it compared to an old one, I don't know. I've never seen an old one in person, but in the pictures, it's very close.
It's very close. Yeah, it's very close.
Yeah. Except the dial. The old one, the dial is like matte, and this one it has some kind of texture. It kind of looks like I'm not sure, like a pavement or something like that.
Yeah. I was about to say that, almost like a concrete look. But if I said that, it wouldn't be true either. But yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
It's got some kind of texture to it.
I know what it's like. It's like, no, it's not like that. I was going to say when you paint
a wall or something.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
When you paint the wall, right, and you see the brush marks on it, like a little bit like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But coming up towards the end now. But what is your favorite watch in your collection?
It's like trying to pick a favorite child. Like they're all different and unique and special in different ways.
If you are Chinese, there's always a favorite child.
All right. Well, maybe I'm not that Chinese. You have to grade me on a scale of 1 to 10. I'd say I think my minute repeater. I think it's a very special piece. It meets everything, all of my criteria.
Sorry, which piece was that?
It's a minute repeater chronograph. But the thing that makes it not a huge amount of money, actually I got it for very little money, is that it's a pocket watch. It's engraved with the engraving says like it has the name of the person, and it says award for like best salesman 1928 or something, summer of 1928 or something. So that's what I thought that was interesting because the next year was a stock market crash. So some guy was selling, I don't know what he's selling, but he's selling something really well, like a year for the stock market crash. And they gave him this like heavy gold minute repeater chronograph.
And that's why he sold it.
But the thing is, it wasn't melted. It's not melted. A lot of old pocket watches, if their case is solid gold, that's a lot of gold. And you think about it, the Great Depression came and people were having a hard time. People were starving and in a very bad situation in this country. And, this guy, nobody melted the gold. There's a lot of gold there, actually. It's a heavy case. It's a hunter case, so there's a top to it, and it's big. It's like it's bigger than a typical vintage pocket. I guess a few American Railroad watches, but it's a very big watch. So it has engraving, which is really interesting, and plus it's a minute repeater, and it works.
That is a special piece to have. When
I first got it, I thought it was broken because it's the minute repeater. I kept pressing it like an idiot, and the first time it chimed like the minutes exactly, the hours and the quarters and the minutes, it did everything. And then I pressed it again a few more times, and then it was like less and less each time. And I'm like, it's broken. And so I took it to my watchmaker, and he was like, screw you, man. Get that out of my shop. Do not come near me with a 1928-minute repeater chronograph. Get that out of here. And I was like, all right. And so I found some guy online in a Facebook group who was in like Florida, and he said he could fix it. And I'm like, do I really trust you? And then he said, I work at like some jewelry store in Florida. It's like a well-known jewelry store. So I called the jewelry store. I verified the guy works there. He's the watchmaker. I'm like, all right, whatever. So I sent it to Florida, and it survived the trip to Florida. And he looked at it, and then he sent it back to me. So I'm like, this thing is never going to get fixed. And then I read somewhere about this like this watchmaker like in this like kind of rural part of Connecticut. So I drove like 2 hours to like this watchmaker. I called him on the phone. It's like these two young dudes that have this like shop that is it's like in this building that used to be like an old mill or something. It's like next to a river, or like a small stream. It's very picturesque actually. As I go there, and it's like this workshop, and there's these two young guys, and they're like, working on all this weird stuff, like marine chronometers, like in a box, and all kinds of weird stuff. And they're like, yeah, we make everything. We make balance stats. We'll do everything. We don't mind. Bring it here. We'll look at it. I'm like, okay. So I bring it to these guys, and they're like, oh, this is a cool watch. Like they're like, oh, we have another one just like it. Like, I'll show you. I was like, okay. But then he's like looking at it. He's pressed the button. He's like looking at it, looks at it with the loop and everything. And he's like, I could take it apart and oil it, but honestly, if you're not going to use it every day, I'm not sure if it's worth it. But I know you drove a long way, and I hate to tell you this, but the button is slightly sticky, so that if you don't press it down all the way, this particular pocket watch doesn't have an all or nothing piece. So, like a more high-end minute repeater movement, which eventually became standard, like a Patek of that period, you'd find it. When you press the minute repeater or pull the slide, it either does the whole thing or it does like nothing. So it's all or nothing. And so that way, if you pull it in the dark, it won't like tell you the wrong time. It won't tell you it's like, it's like 12:59, and it'll tell you that it's like 11:30 or something. It won't tell you the wrong time. But that piece, it doesn't have that all or nothing piece. So if you don't push the button down all the way and it doesn't go up all the way, it won't repeat the entire time. So the button was just slightly stuck. He wiped off a little grease or something, and it was working perfect. After it went to Florida, got kicked out of my watchmaker shop, all kinds of stuff happened. And then it was actually, the thing is fine, actually. So it works. I can play it for you if you want. I have it.
That'd be great.
That'd be
Let's
great.
see it. Yeah.
I hope it works, because
Yeah,
hopefully I didn't drop at any point. Anyway, I don't know if you can see this, but there's like an engraving on there.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty big. You see how big this thing is?
Yeah, it's really big. Yeah.
I don't know what to have for comparison. Like
Oh.
some Scotch tape. My daughter uses this for homeschool sometimes, virtual school sometimes. So it says presented by C.H. Reed to RMMS Cleary, winner of 27th anniversary sales contest, summer of 1928. Let's see if this thing works. You hear that? I'm not sure it did it
That's
right,
amazing.
but
Yeah.
making a sound at least.
Very loud.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's big. It's easy to be loud when you're this size.
It's fast. It's quite fast.
Yeah.
Well, that was fantastic. That's the first time we've ever done that on the podcast.
Yeah.
I know. You know what I was just thinking when he was doing it? So if you log into Clubhouse now, there's some rooms which are just for meditation and whatever. I was just like, imagine you go into a room and this is all you hear, and people just sitting there like meditating.
Nice, right? It's a very expensive way to meditate, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you know,
So cool.
talking about Clubhouse, I went into a room yesterday and the room was come in and nobody says anything. Right. So I was like,
Why?
what? So I went in there and there's a group of 50 people that's not saying anything. Right. I was like,
God,
what? Like,
why?
why?
I guess you can go on like you can go on a retreat or something. Take a vow of silence or something like that. Isn't that like a monastic?
Weird.
What was
strange.
the room called? Like
It was
no speaking?
No, it was in Chinese, right? It says 什么闭嘴, right? So it was like yeah,
So
like
just a bunch of people.
yeah. And I was like, I thought, but it said 闭嘴. I thought, oh, it's gonna be something like gossipy, right? So
Yeah.
you know, I was doing some research because Long Long said, you know, gossip. So I went in there, actually no gossip, quiet. So I was like looking at my phone, volume's up, yeah, that's up. Yeah, is this not working? My connection's not working. It's like literally, and it wasn't where people are coming and going. It was stable. I was like, huh?
Wow, that's some dedication.
Yeah. And moving on, how did you get involved with Beyond the Dial? And why was Beyond the Dial set up?
Yeah, so that's related to the pandemic. So Beyond the Dial, like the founder is Alan Formello. He's written for a bunch of, he's written for like Rob Report and, Worn and Wound and Gear Patrol and stuff like that. He's a watch journalist. And so he started it, during the pandemic. He started a podcast originally. And then he was writing some articles on the website, but he was looking for more people to contribute. So he sort of tapped into his social network. Was the we have Red Bar here. That's our I guess you guys know Red Bar, watch collector group. So I'd gone to the one in the city a few times, but there's also a Red Bar chapter in the Hudson Valley, which is north of the city. And so I wanted to go to it, but it's kind of like Red Bar is was like an hour from me south, and these guys were like an hour from me north, so it wasn't actually saving that much time. And also they tend to meet at like an inconvenient times, and they didn't meet like every week. It was like every month or something. So I was meaning to go, but it was never a convenient time. Always something going on. But during the pandemic, they started meeting virtually, and so it's very easy to log onto a Zoom, right? So I started going to Red Bar meetings. I told my Longines story is my niche, and I guess they found it entertaining. So Alan was like, "Hey, can you write down that story for us and make it, put it for Beyond the Dial?" And also, like, I've been talking about some topics, watch collecting, like beads of rice bracelets and different ones. He's like, "Oh, can you write a buying guide?" And so, like, bit by bit, I got brought into it, did more and more. Started writing like some book reviews and watch reviews. And then I found out that, I can get watches where I review it and they'll give me the watch for a week, and I can get it for free for a week and wear it, which is kind of fun. I got more and more into it, and, so I write for them very regularly now. So
how important are
Very
watch
cool.
communities to you?
I think it's very important, actually, very important, because at this point in my life, I was kind of like looking for something, in terms of my, like, okay, as a doctor, like you go through this very sort of like stepwise career progression. So you're like, okay, you're in college, then you're in medical school, then you're a resident physician, you're training, and then you're a fellow, and then then you get a job. But then when you get to that point where you get a job, the ladder stops. There's like nowhere to go. Like you could decide, okay, you're going to become a professor or something, but I didn't really want to do that. So it's kind of like, after I guess the next step for me was like when I bought my first watch, it was to become, a partner in the practice. Once you become a partner in the practice, then like, what are you going to do? There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing else to climb at that point, in terms of, at least in a private practice. So then I was like, well, maybe I'll do some leadership stuff. And so I got involved in some, administrative things and different things. And like, with the medical society and stuff like that. But then with that stuff, there's always some element of stress, because it's like, you're dealing with other doctors, especially when you're a surgeon, you depend on people to refer to you. So
Mm.
their opinion of you matters, your reputation matters.
Yeah.
So you have to be a little bit, it's in a good way professional, in a bad way maybe guarded. You can't like you have to be careful. So it's not totally relaxing. I felt like, okay, this is the next thing, but and I do it. It's not like I don't do it. I think it's interesting. It's definitely important. But it's not really like, it's like, it wasn't really like an outlet for me, And so when I got into watches, it was actually meeting people was the interesting part. Like before the pandemic, like for example, my watchmaker shop, like people hang out there. Like I would go there every week, not to get my watch back or whatever. You just go there. He has a couple of chairs. He gives you an espresso. He's from Italy. It'd be like, hey, I have an espresso. And then another guy comes in and he's like, oh, what kind of watch what do you have? Oh, my watch. And he tells you a story. Like I met a guy who started, his father was the guy who developed the electric movement for Timex, right? His father was like this big watch guy. And then I met another guy who collects all kinds of weird things, like not just watches, like pens, cufflinks, pocket watches, clocks, all kinds of weird stuff. You meet like a bunch of different people. So it's interesting. And then you go on adventures. Like I went to Connecticut to try to get my pocket watch fixed. And I met these interesting dudes that are doing some crazy thing, It's interesting. Now, like, it's remote. So I do like, write articles, do podcasts with you guys. I get to meet you guys.
Thank you.
It's interesting.
Thanks.
Yeah.
What I wanted to open that up to the floor actually. What do the watch communities mean to you? I mean, our interview questions have evolved very much from when we interviewed both of you. But what do watch communities mean to you first, Jacqueline, and then maybe Long Long? Am I just ramming home the fact that you haven't had any offline experience?
Yeah. So
Sorry.
so my watch community experience is like James. Since the pandemic, it's all virtual. It's all up in the cloud. But it's, I mean, Dan and I have talked about this. You can call it like pessimistic, but I think it's really real talk, right? Like when you meet people in real life, some people are weird and they come off different as what they are like online. So I guess like fortunately or unfortunately, I haven't really met anyone offline. So all the relationships and the conversations I've had, most of them are started from watches, but then 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 would develop into this very organically um uh fruitful conversation, and you learn more about lives and experiences and whatnot. But if I were to say what the watch community means to me, I mean, a year ago when I was just starting off, um I was completely alone, uh, doing research and looking stuff up on forums and online. And now look at me, like I'm on Zoom and I'm talking with 3 other people and interviewing James for a podcast. So it's looking back, it's just I could have never um, you know, guessed how it would be a year ago. But I think it's just being a part of this journey and enjoying what might happen next, and the next person you meet and what stories they bring onto the table. So it's all about connecting and being positive and being open, um, and just talking with people, because again, like I feel so alone sometimes in this, because a lot of my friends, they don't really understand it. So talking with you guys, it's like I found my community. I remember in December like 31st, you write the goodbye 2020 and whatever. And then the story I wrote was I'm so thankful for this year. A lot has happened, but if there's one takeaway, it's like I found my people. So yeah.
God, that's going to be hard to follow.
Yeah,
That's
I
great.
know.
That's great.
Yeah, Long Long.
It sounds, yeah, so very similar to Jacqueline. I feel like it sounds really cheesy. So even when you're
It's
drafting
so
these,
cheesy.
like when you write the, what is it called? The
Caption.
caption for your picture, right?
Mm.
And I keep saying, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. But then I hate being one of those, the people,
Yeah.
the influencers on Instagram, grateful, blessed. And then it's like a beach, right? And they're in a
Yeah.
bikini or whatever. But I'm like, I'm truly fucking grateful because it's like you spend your whole life trying to fit in. And I've always said I've always felt a bit different. Like I was wired differently. I look like a girl, but in my head, it's like I like cars, I like sports, I like watches and everything. And then I'm doing all these things like buying bags and whatever, trying to fit in. But really, in my heart, I'm like, I don't get a kick out of it. And I always thought I was really weird. But then you find this community and you're like, suddenly you're like, I'm so normal. Like I'm not weird at all. And people can understand your excitement. And you can meet people and not have a it's like you can watch people and just say meet at a cafe. You don't need to plan anything. You can just sit there the whole day from morning till night till like
Mhm.
past midnight and just look at watches and talk about watches. And it's made me feel super comfortable just like coming out of my shell and being like it's okay to be wired differently, right? And it took me, I mean, I'm 31. It took me so long to find my group of people, but now I'm just like Jacqueline said, happy you found your people. And then it's given me a chance to just acknowledge that I do need, and aside from my work, which is in finance, I do need a space to be creative. So with the podcast, meeting Dan, Jacqueline, I can go and explore that. Like I can use my brain differently. And I actually didn't know I needed that, but I actually really need it. And this has been really good for me.
I think another
That-
thing
that-
you get
That's a
out
pretty
of
good
it.
answer
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
man.
But I think
Jeez.
for long, I
I'm
think
I'm
for
not saying
long-
anything. I'm not
Yeah.
saying anything. No.
Yeah.
No, you should, and you should go after. But okay, I'm gonna add quickly. I think for long,
Yeah.
one thing that she also like gets out of it, and I wouldn't say like get out of it, it's just kind of like
Mhm.
happens naturally, is that you inspire people, right? Like
Mm.
I'm sure you receive these DMs like, hey, I've been following you
Mm.
for, such
Mm.
and such months, and it's
Mm.
great
Yeah.
what you're doing, and I've read your interviews and know your story, and what's your
Mm.
opinion on this, right?
Mhm.
And that's the whole other side to this community, because you don't share that with everyone. It's something that you see, and then you just not take for granted, but you just have
I
to remind
know.
yourself. It's just like, wow, this is so
Mm.
great. Like, these young people reach out to you, and they care
Yeah.
about what you think, and they trust you. Like the trust.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Mm. James, did you want to say something before I round it off?
Yeah, I think I second what Lung Lung said about a creative outlet. Like it
Mhm.
when I think going through things like when you're in training as a doctor, you have a certain amount of creative outlet in terms of you have to present about stuff. So
Mhm.
you have to present about a patient. Actually, as a surgeon, every week we had something called morbidity and mortality rounds, where you present your complications, all your, the bad outcomes, and talk about it. And so there's always like some kind of creativity going on, like you're discovering, you're creating, you're learning, and then get to the point where you're practicing, and yeah, you're learning, but it's not the same. You're not like presenting stuff in the same way, and not regularly, certainly. So that a creative outlet, I think, for me also, that resonated with me. And I think another thing I would add is, which we sort of touched on, but maybe not said the word, is identity. So we
Mm.
talked before about, okay, Chinese identity. That's something you're born with, right? Something you get received from your parents, but also something that you get from outside. Like people look at you, you're Chinese, and that's it. Especially in the West, right? But being part of something like a watch community, it's like you chose that's something you picked. That represents, that's your identity. And so I feel like in addition to I have a few identities, as a doctor, as a husband, as a father, and so on. But now I have also this other identity, which is, like watch enthusiast, or whatever you want to call it. And I can connect with a totally different group of people than I would never normally have met any of you, or had any
Yeah.
reason or met the way to reach out to other people. But now I do. And honestly, making friends as an adult is difficult. as well.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
meeting people and connecting with people on a real level, human level, it's not that easy as an adult. So it's great. It's been great for me.
Man, you guys have totally sandbagged me there.
Your turn.
Like, yeah, you guys
You
have
can't keep your British
absolutely
reserve.
Yeah.
killed me now.
Your
Like,
British
how do
reserve
I?
is not going to hold up.
How do I? I'm not that reserved.
Okay.
Right. So, I guess I've been into watches probably longer than everybody here, and I also went through that solo journey. So everything you guys say, I felt it. And then when I found people that were interested in watches, before you would try to talk to people about watches, but you could see in their eyes that they're just glazed over and they're there physically, but not there mentally. And they actually probably just want you to shut up.
Mm.
But then when you are with that first contact with watch enthusiasts, you suddenly have this spark and you think, oh, I can keep talking and keep talking and keep talking and keep talking. And that initially was really, really good because I had somewhere to have a creative outlet, my passion more like outlet of watches, and also I was learning more. And then that next phase, led into learning more because I found it a great way to learn from other people about watches. I thought it was almost and a more efficient way of doing it. And then these strong relationships came out of it. Like these super, super strong relationships naturally just gave birth to these, amazing relationships I share with all of you. And for that, it sounds like Long Long said, very, very cheesy, but I really feel blessed, to have found that because I'm aware that a lot of people don't have that and haven't found it. But I do want to finish on in saying, you mentioned, Jacqueline, about Long Long inspiring people. A year ago, I met Long Long a while back, and, I could see how powerful she could be, right? But I had kept it to myself. So I spoke to her, I spoke to her, got to know her. And in my mind, in my heart, I thought, God, this girl, she could make a massive impact. And then fast forward maybe a year later, I saw her again. Again, we had a great conversation. And I did tell her, I said, you will inspire people. The potential you have is far greater than you actually realize. And she listened to it, but even in her mind, I could see it through her eyes. She didn't believe what I said. She didn't believe it in herself that she had this capacity, but I believed in it. And then maybe half a year later, I think she's slowly realizing it. Like people are feedbacking stuff to her because it's just me at that time saying it. Nobody else was saying it, right? And suddenly everybody else, she's doing her stuff. People are coming, she's getting interviews left, right, and center. People are DMing her with super positive messages. She's realizing that, oh, maybe I could be that person. Maybe I can be something like a role model or mentor people, inspire people. That has been amazing. Where you go through the journey and you then come to the position where you inspire others because of what you went through in the journey. You have that experience and you want to bring other people along that journey, and then they inspire. And then when you inspire people, they can do amazing things. So I think that's it.
Thank you. That's so sweet. Yeah.
Right. So that was the last question. But
I
James,
feel the love.
Yeah.
I did okay then, right? I did okay.
Yeah, that was totally scripted. We're all reading the Word document.
Much better than the silence group.
Imagine if we didn't watch, we should do that. I watch Clubhouse script, right? And it's like STFU. Yeah. Like, I don't care about your opinions. I don't care about how much money you have. Just sit here and don't say anything.
Yeah.
But we normally end up the interview with a quick fire, James. So just quick questions there. I don't think normally we do 10. Oh, there are 9 today. Right. Number 1, what was the last watch you bought?
It was a Seiko Lord Matic.
Okay.
It's got an engraving on the back that's it's from like the, I guess it's pretty common. It's from like the Japanese telecommunication company. It was like a gift to the president or something.
Oh wow.
I guess they always bought Lord Maddox. So yeah, it has a kanji day on the day. It's a day and date. It says kanji, which is kind of cool. And then yeah, condition is nice. It's on the wrong bracelet. As my friend David fled from Beyond the Dial, he's like a Seiko guru. He's like, let me check my catalog. And he like pulls out his 1976 Seiko catalog. No, actually, it's supposed to have this bracelet. I was like, okay, whatever. I don't care. I'm not that much of a nerd yet. But
Right,
yeah, that was
number
awesome.
two. Number 2, I think you've answered this though, but it may be different. Buyer's regret. Is it that Longines? Poor Longines.
Yeah, they're never gonna ask for my endorsement, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. Number 3, your favorite Chinese dish.
Ooh, yes, I know. I missed it last year. My birthday's at the end of March, and I usually only eat this dish on my birthday and on Christmas, because in America, Jewish people eat Chinese food on Christmas because it's the only thing open,
Right.
and also Chinese people are not really anti-Semitic. For
Tell me.
You want to hear the whole story? Very
No,
long.
tell me the food. What is it?
Oh, sorry. The food is sticky rice with crab, Dungeness crab, steamed. Actually, the place I go to now, I used to be my favorite food as a kid, but now the place nearby, they have the rice is like XO style.
Okay.
It's a
Oh, I
Cantonese
totally
dish.
know
You
what
I'm
you're talking about. I
It's
recently
whole-
had it.
It's a bamboo
The
steamer.
sticky rice.
thing,
Yeah.
The rice on the bottom.
Yeah,
the
it's
crab, big
niangao
crab.
and then the crab, right? It's a Cantonese like New Year's or like dish that I had for
It's
the
like
first
my
time.
favorite.
Yeah.
The first time I had it, actually, well, I'd say the local place here, I like it even better than the one I ate growing up. It's like XO style rice. It's like a little greasier or something. And so the first time I
Yes,
had it at the
we
restaurant,
love oil.
I
Coming
went
from a
back.
doctor.
The first, well, whatever.
Yeah.
So
Vascular surgeon as
Cure
well.
cure thyself. So the first time I had it, I went back to the restaurant afterwards, like the same week. I ordered the same dish, but I ordered only for myself, and I ate the entire crab by myself. It was like all greasy, like afterwards, like, oh man, I need to wash my face.
Yeah.
What did I just do?
Yeah.
Right, moving on.
Delicious.
Number 4, which I believe is very valid because behind you is a bookshelf, which I saw it and I thought, man, I want to see what books he's reading. Like I saw it.
I know
was
you're like on the
oh.
quest to read 10,000
Yeah, I was
books by
like,
the end of the
yeah.
year, right?
I was like, what book is that? I'm reading. I was trying to find the content because you look like a reader. So what's the best book you've read?
Ever in my life?
Yeah. Recommend a book then.
Recommend one?
Yeah, recommend a book. A good one.
Should I look at my shelf. I don't know. Right now, I'm mostly reading books about watches. I don't know if that's relevant to your reading journey. It doesn't seem like you're reading.
What
about
book? Okay,
watches.
no, I do. I'm reading. I read watch books. Which one would you say is good? Don't say A Man and His Watch. It's not good. it's not good. That book.
I don't know. I don't see the books I read. They're not actually that good, but they're kind of informative. I recently read the.
Yeah,
a
you're
book
right.
called
Yeah, you're right. A
Movado.
lot of them are good coffee table books, right?
Yeah.
They're not necessarily books you sit there and read, I find.
I read a book about the history of Movado recently.
Oh,
That was pretty good. It was written a while ago though, so my reviews on Beyond the Dial, but it has. I think Movado's kind of an interesting brand to collect, but the book was written so long ago that the interesting pieces people have already they're very
snapped up.
expensive already,
Yeah.
and then the other ones are maybe not that interesting.
Okay.
But I kind of wanted an overview of the brand, and that was good. This one,
Great.
this Omega book is, if you, I don't know if you probably, I don't think you like Omega, right?
Likes Omega.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's a
You like
very
Omega?
unfair comment. But that would be
Yeah.
true.
Wait, your first watch was an Omega.
That's why he doesn't like it. My first watch was a Longines.
I had two watches which were Omega. Yeah.
This book is. Have you ever seen this book?
Yeah.
The big
Okay.
Omega book.
Okay.
This is like the history of their brand that they wrote.
It's a big book.
Back. The museum,
That looks good. That looks good.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of information.
Looks like I wanted to read that actually. Maybe if I read that, I might get into Omega.
What is it called? Journey Through Time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
All
very
right.
interesting. It's got a lot of information.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I have a
Okay,
review
next
of that
one.
too. I have
Next
a bunch
one.
of book reviews on Beyond the Dial. You should check it out.
Okay.
I will
Oh,
check
yeah,
that
yeah,
out.
yeah,
Nice
yeah.
plug. I will
Yeah.
check that out. Number 5. Best life advice you would give to your younger self.
Don't buy that Longines.
Parking
Life-
tickets can be expensive in the long run.
Life advice. I would say I think the secret to a satisfying life is related to morality. And so I would say I would probably tell myself, what I really believe now, which is that the way to be a good person, first of all, being a good person and being satisfied with yourself is more important than anything. That's one. So it doesn't matter what other people think or what, your parents think or what people in your workplace think or what society thinks. The most important thing is that you can go home at night and feel satisfied with what you've done that day. And the way to feel that way is to fulfill your roles, in the relationships that you have in your life, to the best way you can. So be the best doctor that you can and treat all the patients like your own family members. Be the best husband that you can, be the best father that you can. I guess I didn't have wife or kids at that time, but be the best person that you can, I guess I would say. And try to be whatever thing you do in relationship to other people, try to do that role to the best of your ability, so that you can be satisfied with what you've done every day.
So you seem to strike me as someone that holds themselves high to a high moral standard. So basically incorporating that in everything you do and being the best in that regard.
And
Not
try to
necessarily-
improve
Yeah.
little by little every day. I guess that would be part of it too.
Okay. Right. Moving on. I'm going to skip a few because we're running out of time. But
Good. This is
are-
exactly how my boards went. My oral boards take up too much time. They run out of time to ask questions.
you are an editor. You write articles. But who's your favorite watch writer?
Oh, do I have to say somebody at Beyond the Dial? I'll exclude
No,
people from Beyond the
anybody.
Dial.
Okay.
I'll
yeah.
exclude Beyond the Dial
Exclude.
because it's conflict of
Yeah,
interest.
anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say I like. We're talking about online now, right?
Yeah.
Well, any.
Not
Yeah,
books. I would say I enjoy reading Ariel Adams's articles about like the business of watches. I always find them to be like insightful, and he has like a
Yeah.
point of view.
Yeah.
And if you don't agree with his point of view, at least he he takes a point of view,
Yes.
and he has like he's very opinionated, I guess.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, I enjoy his like takes on the watch industry. I find that I learned about the gray market from him. So
Okay.
messed up my view of that
And
Longines.
the last question, I think we'll finish on this one. What are the best Instagram accounts to follow? I'll give you the first 3, which are A Dose of Time, Long on Time, and Shanghai Watch Gang, Mr.
No, Mr.
Daniel
Daniel
Sum.
Sum. Yeah.
Mr. Daniel Sum,
Yeah.
sorry. Follow Mr. Daniel Sum. Did I say follow Mr. Daniel Sum?
No.
Oh,
you
I
said-
didn't. Oh, all right. So I've given you the first 4 there, but obviously they're the best. So what's following on there then?
Should I plug my own Beyond the Dial? Watch Med Time, MEDTIME. Watch like
Okay.
the wristwatch. Yeah, I like Watch Fred. The Breitling guy. He
No.
occasionally posts things. Do you know who I'm talking about?
No, because I'm not really into Breitling, so I
Oh,
wouldn't
well, it's
know.
vintage,
Yeah.
so it's
Okay.
different.
What's his
but-
name? Watch Fred.
Watch Fred. Yeah, his name's
Okay.
Fred
Watch
Mendelbaum.
Fred.
He's a consultant for them.
I love how
I know,
creative
but-
watch guys are.
Seriously. Yeah, Watch Fred.
Okay.
I mean, Goldberger. Obviously,
Yeah,
John
of course.
Goldberger.
Yes.
He's got like, oh, you know what's a good one? I think it's called Horo Mario Bro. Like
yeah,
Horologic.
I think
Horror-
yes,
Horror
I think
Mario,
he's in
I think his name is.
Singapore. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a lot of macros of like very good finishing. Do you know this dude? He's
Yeah.
I like his Instagram a lot.
Yeah.
It's
Have
very
you seen-
distinctive.
Have you seen Longopedia?
Oh yeah.
That's like one
Yes.
of my favorites. It's like a Wikipedia, but with great photos. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good too.
Yeah.
He's a
Yeah,
nice
there's-
guy
there's
as
a
well.
few.
Alp, like he's very,
Hmm.
he's again, you're always concerned about when you actually meet the people. He's actually quite a
Yeah.
nice guy. Yeah, quite a nice guy and quite humble. Can sit there with and actually have a conversation with you because not everybody can. But yeah, he's.
Can we
nice.
just put James on the spot? And I want to ask, which are the worst Instagram accounts?
I blocked all of them, so I can't find them anymore. Or no, I mute them.
Okay.
I mute them so they don't see me that I unfollow them, but I can't see any of their posts anymore.
Well,
I mean, I
Since
get
you
all
asked
the
the-
spam all the time.
since you
Like,
asked
do
the
you want
question,
to
Long Long,
sell
which
fake
ones are the
watches
worst
in
for you?
Yeah.
America?
Yeah, please.
Oh yeah, you must.
No,
think you
just
have
bad
something in mind.
photos. No, just honestly bad
Yeah,
photos.
so which
Like
accounts
the
then?
ones- yeah.
There's
Go on,
so
name and
many.
shame them. Name and shame them.
I'll get you a list. I literally will share it, but I need to go through and find a list.
No,
Like it's just like
I-
bad lighting and like
I know,
Yeah.
I know people. I can name right now.
Okay, go on. You said
I
I know
haven't-
people I can name right now, and then now you're shaking your head.
I can't because
That you
because-
can't do it.
yeah,
Oh, there's a
I can't.
guy named BertNet. What's this? It's like BertNet
69.
You know this dude? He has
Yeah,
like
he's a
really
Seiko
good-
guy.
Yeah. He's got nice Seikos, like really nice ones.
Yeah.
If you saw only his Instagram, you'd be like, "Holy crap, Seiko is like the Patek of like Seiko." I don't know.
Mhm.
It's like yeah, I like that.
Okay, we
guy
need to
too.
underline that was a good account, not a bad account.
Oh, good
Yeah.
account.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
I think it's
okay.
French or something.
Okay.
Right.
Right. So to all the listeners, because Long Long and Jacqueline aren't comfortable, I will get the list off them and then I
Yeah.
will post it on my stories.
Sure, do it.
No, I won't. Even I'm not that bad. But anyway, let's round this up. Thank you very much, James, for your time.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank
Yeah,
you for
thanks for having
sharing your watch story and your experiences in the US. We really had a good time on that.
Yeah.
And I look forward to doing the same again on your channel very soon.
Yeah, it's
Lots
been
more fun.
a real pleasure. It's really nice to talk to you guys. Guess I'll be seeing some of you soon.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay. See you
Thanks.
guys on the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Waiting List podcast. Hit the subscribe button, and the next episode will come straight to your phone as soon as it's ready. Whilst I'm here, please remember to leave a nice review and follow us on Instagram at the Waiting List Podcast.